Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you guys how to build a REST API using the Django framework in Python in under 30 minutes. So I'll take you guys from being a complete beginner to knowing not only the basics of Django, how to use it, how to set up, and all of the different initial boilerplate code that you might be confused with if you've ever tried starting with this framework. I'll also set up a very basic CRUD API where you're going to be able to create, read, update, and delete a database of users, and everything done really quickly and simply to facilitate your learning experience. Before we get into the video, if you could leave a like and subscribe, I would massively appreciate it. This is actually one of my first videos in Python, although I've been working with Python my whole life. I'm interested in seeing how you guys react to this kind of video. So if you want to see me making more Python videos, definitely leave a like and make this video blow up, because then I'll get the impression that you guys want more. So yeah, that's basically it. Let's get into the tutorial. Okay, everyone, so let's get started. I have here opened up a folder inside of my code editor of choice, which is VS Code, but you can use whatever you want. And I opened the project here. I have my terminal, which is where we're going to be executing all of the commands that we want to actually initiate our project. Now, before we start, I want to say that I expect you guys to have a very basic knowledge of Python or higher. Like I'm not going to be going over Python itself. I'm going to be going over how to build an API with Python. So I do expect you to know Python or have a basic understanding of it. I also expect you to already have the Python or Python 3 library or package installed inside of your computer. If you want to check it out, if you already have it, you do Python -- version like this, or Python 3 -- version like this, and if it shows up the actual version in your computer, it means that it is working. I also expect you to have pip installed. If you don't have pip installed, I'll put up a command over here in the screen, and you can just install that as well. That will be your package manager for Python, and we're going to be using it to actually install the package that we need to use, which is Django. So right off the bat, we do need to install Django. So I'm going to say pip install Django, just like that. And we'll also be using Django REST framework, which for those who don't know, so Django is the web framework that we're going to be using for Python, right? And Django REST framework is basically a tool built upon Django that facilitates creating REST APIs for us. It's very standard to use it because it just facilitates the process a lot, right? So I'm going to press enter, and I obviously already installed it, so nothing will happen for me. But for you, if you've never installed it before, it will work. Now we want to use Django to actually start a project. So I'm going to run Django admin start project, and then I'm going to put a name for our project. So I'm going to call it new project, but you can call it whatever you want. Now, this is going to create a folder inside of our app folder that we're already in, and this is going to be where all of our Django project is going to be contained. So I'm going to change my directory to go inside of that, and now we're going to be creating our API inside of our project. Now, this folder over here is for the general project that we have, right? So it contains a bunch of stuff like the URLs that we might want to use inside of our project. It also contains settings, all the kind of stuff, but we want to create an actual app, which is going to be the folder of our project. So we're going to be running Python 3, or in your case, it can be just Python, manage .py, then start app, and then I'm going to put API. Perfect. Now we'll create a folder for us, and this is where most of our code will go inside of. So if you didn't understand yet, the new project folder over here is the main project folder. It will contain configurations and settings and all that kind of stuff. And the API folder is the one app we're going to be having inside of our project. So you can actually create multiple apps inside of your project, and they all can have different purposes, but our API over here is the only one we're going to be using. This is going to contain all of our different endpoints, all that kind of stuff, our views, our models, everything, and we're going to be building everything inside of this folder. Now we need to basically tell Django to register both the REST framework that we installed and also this new app that we have. And the way we do that is we go to our new project folder. We then go to settings.py, and inside of here, we should see installed apps as one of the arrays that we have. And we just add both the REST framework and the actual folder that is going to contain our app. So it's going to be API or whatever you put over here. Now, in order to create a REST API, you do need to have some sort of data, right? Where we're going to be making a CRUD here. So I will actually make a very simple user type project API where we're going to be having users as our source of data. So since we need data, we need to define how our data is going to look like. So the way we do that is through the models.py file. I'm going to go over here. And as you can see, it already has some code set up, but not really anything major. So we definitely want to get started inside of this file. So in order to create a model for how your data is going to look like, we have to create a class and give a name to this type of data. In our case, we're going to be working with user data. So we need to create a model for a user. And inside of here, we'll just specify that this will be a model. So models.model. And we're obviously getting this models package up here at the top. And then inside of this class, we want to specify the different fields that we want to have inside of this type of data. Now, a user can have multiple things: name, age, email, I don't know, a bunch of different types of information. I'm just going to keep it very simple, name and age, since I want this video to be quick. So we're going to just have two different types of data. One will be a string and the other one will be an integer, like an integer, right? So in order to define age as one of the fields, I'm just going to write age over here and set it equal to, and now we define how it's going to be defined as its type. Like I said, this should be an integer. So the way we define this as an integer is by saying models.integer field. Perfect. And this should define this as one of the fields. Now we want to create the name field. So I'll put name equals to models. And for name, it's a bit different. It's not straightforward as just saying string. It actually is a little bit weird. We call it a char or character field, and we can specify the maximum length that we want inside of a name. So when we create users in our project, we can specify how many characters are allowed as part of this type of data. So I'll keep it simple and just put max length is equal to 100. Perfect. Now, one common thing we might want to do is actually be able to print a user, for example, to get some sort of debugging information or anything like that. So if we want to create a string version of this model, we can very easily do it by creating a function here and defining it as a string just like this. And at the bottom, we can return some sort of string equivalent to this object. In our case, a user usually is represented by its name. So I'll just say self.name as the return from this function. Perfect. And now if I ever do something like print user, this should actually not return back an object. It should return the name of the user. Now that we have our model created, we actually want to generate the data based on it. Obviously, we're going to be using a database to do that. So this will actually create the database tables based on the kind of model that we're using. So to do that, we run Python 3 and then manage.py and then make migrations, just like that. As you can see, it says that it made the migrations for it. It's on a db.sqlite3 file. Now we want to actually migrate them. So we'll say Python 3 make migrations. Instead of that, we'll just say Python 3 manage.py migrate. Perfect. And as you can see, it finished migrating all of them. Perfect. Now we want to create the serializer. Now, this is basically going to be a file that is going to tell Python how to transform our model into JSON data that we can access in our API. So the way we do that is we first import from the REST framework library, we import the serializers package, and then we obviously access the file we just created, the models. We say from.models, we import the user object. So we're importing this thing over here, right? And we need to specify in some piece of code how to translate this model into some sort of data. So I'm just going to say class user serializer. And then we're going to say that this is a serializer. We'll access the package and say model serializer. And then we can create a class called meta and then say model is equal to user and fields is equal to all. Now, if you're confused by what this is basically, like I said, just gonna convert and properly transform all your data into JSON that your API can access. I wouldn't worry that much into understanding exactly what this is. We're basically just saying what kind of model we want to transform and also what fields in that model we want to transform as well. And this is mostly just how the serializers package works. So you won't be really writing anything more than this. So I wouldn't worry that much about learning and understanding this part. Now, what I would definitely worry about with learning is how to create your views, because this is where most of our code will go into. Views.py over here is where we're going to handle the logic for our API endpoints. So let's straight up just start importing a bunch of stuff from the REST framework library. So first of all, I want to import decorators, which are going to help us define what kind of routes we have. So I'm going to import API view. Then I'll just copy this up and paste it a couple times because a lot of it will be similar. Then we're going to import from the response object. Then just from the library itself, we want to import the status. And then I want to import actually the user model because we're going to be using it here, right? So from models, we want to import user. And then from our serializer, we want to import the user serializer that we create. So this thing over here, right? And now we can start defining our actual endpoints. Now, the first endpoint I want to create is a get user one. So it's just a very simple endpoint that is going to return a fake user just to test out to see if our API is working. So I'm going to say def get user, and I'm going to put a request as one of the arguments to this function. Now, we need to define if this is a get request, a post request, whatever it is, right? So the way we do that is by using the API view that I imported over here from the decorators, and I'm going to define it to be a get request, just like this. Now, inside of here, I want to basically just return a response. So this is how it works. You define the endpoint function. You can get information from the request if you want to. You can get anything you want, and you return a response object. And inside of here, you need to return the serialized data. Now, how am I going to do that? I'm just going to say user serializer over here and pass in the actual data, which is going to be a fake data. For example, we'll say name is equal to Pedro and age is equal to 23. Perfect. Actually, I need to make this into yeah, perfect. Now, before we continue with anything else, let's test out to see if it's working. Now, in order to actually make this work, we created the function that is going to be used for this endpoint, but we actually haven't defined the route or the endpoint that needs to be called by the whenever someone calls the API. So the way we do that is through the urls.py file. In here, we're going to say from Django.urls, we import the path, and then from the views file that we have, we want to import the get user function. Now, we'll create the URL patterns over here, and we'll actually just define one path initially, which is going to be the one for users. Now, this is the route, as you might know from making APIs in a different way. This is what we're going to be using to call to make the API request. Now, we need to specify the function that we're going to be calling when this route is called and a name for it. So we're going to say name is equal to get users or just get user. Now, the way we route this is we actually grab this URL patterns and put them inside of the URL patterns inside of our actual project. So remember, this new project folder over here is what encompasses all of the different apps you have inside of your folder, right? Now, every one of those apps can have their individual URL patterns, their individual endpoints and all of that. And then we just dispatch them from the new project folder over here. Now, the way we specify this is I'm going to say path over here, then I'm going to put a route to API, and I want to include the API.urls, this file over here. Now I need to also import include over here at the top. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We can actually test this out by running the command over here at the bottom, Python 3 manage .py run server. Now you can see it is running the server, and it's running on a URL called this one over here. Now the way I can access this is actually just going through to this server inside of our normal browser, right? And as you can see, it actually gives us good information about the API, like the fact that it has 2 different URLs for this project and such. But we actually don't want to just see that. We want to access the endpoint that we created. Now, like I said, it actually should, when you're making the request, it should start with this path and then finish it off with this path over here. So if I want to access that endpoint, I need to first go to the API one and then go to the users one. And as you can see, we get some errors. Now, the reason why we got error, it says over here, but you can see it has some good debugging functionality. The problem is actually in our code. It's over here. Inside of our views, we actually need to access, after you serialize data, you need to actually say .data. That was literally my mistake, but I'll close this and I'll run again just so you guys see. I didn't even need to do that, but yeah, let's open this up. Let's remake this, and you see we actually get a successful return in our API. We see our data over here. We see it was a HTTP 200, and that is great. We can actually test all of our endpoints this way if we're interested in, and this is what we're going to be using for the rest of the video. Now let's get back into our code, and let's create the functionality of adding a user. So how are we going to do that? Well, to do that, we actually need to come over here and make something similar to what we did before. But instead of this being a GET request, we're going to make this a POST request. Also, we're going to change this to create user. And we're going to actually not fake data. We're going to do it a bit different now. Now it's where we actually start learning how to use our models in our favor. So we need to first recognize that we're going to be sending some data from the front end, right? Whenever we make the API request, we need to send the data of the name and the age through this request argument. So we need to first get that data and serialize it. So I'm going to say serializer equal to user serializer, and I want to serialize the data that is going to come from this request. The way we access that data is by saying request.data. Then I want to check to see if this serializer data is actually valid. And we can do that by just checking with this function, is valid. And if it is, I want to save the serialized data like this and actually return a response with the data in itself. So we'll say serializer.data, and we can send back an actual status of the request. For example, we can define the status as a status.http, and if you've worked with HTTP codes before, you might know that a 201 created is the return that we want to put over here. So what we're saying here is whenever you want to create a user, you send from where you're making the API request, you send the data, we serialize it, we check to see if the serialized data is valid. If it is, we save it in our database and we return a 201 response with the data back to the user or whoever made the request. But if it's not valid, then we return back a response that is the errors inside of the serialized data, and we return a status equal to status.http 400 bad request. Perfect. Now we can actually test to see if this is gonna work. Now, one thing we do need to make a change is we created a new endpoint. So we do need to come to our API over here, urls.py inside of our API folder. And here we need to define the path to this endpoint. Now we're gonna copy this and we're gonna put a comma and just add another one over here. And inside of users, we actually want to add a new extension to this endpoint. We want to add an extension called create for us to know that this is the create route. Then we also need to put the create user function over here and import it and put a name called create user. Perfect. Now, if I come to our Google Chrome over here and I put API/users/create, you'll see that it will prompt us an error saying that the method get is not allowed, because it's actually not allowed, right? We're not making a get request. We're actually making a post request. Now, it actually has over here at the bottom a little place where we can actually make a post request, which will basically bypass this error. We can pass in some JSON data inside of here and use that data as what we're going to be passing into our request in our API request. So I'm going to put in some data. First of all, we need to put in the name of the user. I'm going to say Pedro Machado, it's my name. And then we need to put in the age, right? Make sure you use double quotes or else it won't work. I'm going to put 23. Then we're going to click on post. And as you can see, we got back object, including an ID, an age, and a name. Now you might think, wait, we never made an ID. Well, it does automatically for you, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, is that actually in our database? Well, it is. The thing is, we don't have a way to actually check all of the items of our database. So I want to manipulate this get user thing that we created over here and actually make it not return just a fake user, but return all of the data in our database table. So I'm going to change this to get users instead of get user. I'm also going to change this to get users, this to get users, and this to get users. And inside of here, we want to fetch from our database all of the data inside of it and then return that. So to do that, it's pretty simple. We're just going to say users equal to the user model dot objects to basically access the objects inside of it. And then we just specify that we want all of the objects. Now this should return back some list of objects, but it's not serialized yet. So we're going to use our serializer over here, user serializer, and we're going to put in the users that we get back from this call. Now we need to specify in the serializer that this can actually be a list, that this will return back many data. So we put many equal to true. And then in the response, we just return back the serializer.data. Now if this is true, it means that if I go over here and I press enter, we should see a list including the user we just created, which means our API and our database are actually working. Perfect. In my opinion, this should encompass most of the basics because it's already a very simple get request and a post request. But I did promise you guys I was going to show a CRUD. So we're going to be doing some update and delete logic to actually make the video a little bit more concise. I already have written the code and I'm just going to paste it over here and go over exactly what it is, because it looks overly complicated. But if I spend more time explaining the code rather than writing it and typing it, I think you guys will get the most value out of the amount of time. So when we want to work with both delete and update, what do we need? Well, we need to access a specific user that we want to delete or update, right? So we need to reach out for the database and try to get one of the users and then either update the data in that user or delete the data in that user. That is a bit different from the other two requests that we made because the other two didn't require us to try to find a specific user in the table at all. So that's why this over here is a bit different. First of all, we not only have a request, but we also have a PK, which is a primary key. Primary key in databases is known as basically the identifier for an item inside of that database. So a primary key here will be the ID of the user, this thing over here. So if I pass into the request a primary key of 1, we can either delete or update this user over here. Now, the way we do this is by basically saying user equal to user, the user model, .objects.get, and then we specify the primary key field to be equal to whatever we pass inside of this request. Now, in case it doesn't work, we put a try and except, which is if a user doesn't exist. This is pretty standard. If you're trying to get a user with a specific ID, with a specific primary key, use a try and except. And if it's in the except case of the user not existing, we just return a response saying that the user was not found. Now, if you noticed already, when we're making API requests with these routes, you need to actually specify that it's a post, if it's a PUD, if it's a GET. So we're actually going to make a different URL over here, which is going to be a URL for all of the different users manipulation stuff that we want to do related to that involves the primary key. So we're going to keep users as the main part, but then you want to be able to pass in ID over here, like 3, 2, 1, to be able to actually specify which user you want to either get, delete, or update. So the way we define that is by saying that we want to pass in an integer, which is the primary key, just like this. And now if I were to reach out for the users 3, I could do something with the user with the ID 3. It's like a params if you're using another type of technology to make your API. Now we did create this user detail function because it involves all of the different endpoints. We're going to be doing all of them at once. And this is one thing I wanted to show. You can actually write all of the different operations inside of one function, because you can just ask if you can access the different types of methods inside of here. So we can, in one portion of this function, ask, okay, is this a GET request? Is this a PUT request? Is this a delete request? And then insert the logic like this. But we need to also come over here and import this user detail function and pass in as well. So we set that up. Now let's continue going through this user detail function. Why do we have this GET, right? I thought we already did a GET request up here, and I told you guys I was only going to do a PUT and a delete. Well, we have a GET because you can actually find a specific user just by their ID. So now if I come over here and I try to access API users 1, it will break. Let's see what the problem is. It says over here, probably some syntax error. Yeah, I need to put a comma over here. Don't forget to put your commas in your URL patterns. This happens all the time. So I'm going to refresh this. And as you can see, I just reached out, made a GET request for user/1, and we did get back the user 1. Now we only have one user in this application. So I actually want to create a new user for you guys just as a test. So we'll create user 2 so you guys can see. Let's put a name equal to John, and let's put an age equal to 45. And let me actually change this. Put /create and put that data back. Sorry about that. So create this user, John. We should see that if I just make an empty request to users, we should see now both users. But if I say user/2, I should only see John, because we're reaching out for a specific user inside of this database. Now, what about the whole PUT request? This is a bit different. Again, you can pass in the specific primary key over here at the top, so we can specify which user we want to update. So what are we updating here? We're passing in the object and the data that what we want to actually replace the data with. So it's basically the same thing as the post request. We're just saying, okay, if the method is put, so if we're trying to update, I want to get the data that the user is passing in the PUT request, serialize that data, check to see if it's valid, and if it is, I want to save the data and replace it. So over here, if I were to go to users 2 and I put in some data, right? This is John, and I want to update John. And I put in over here, I want to update his age to 47. I can just pass in age. I can just pass in the data like this, and now it will change the age to 47 because it's the thing that is different, right? And you see John remains the same, but the age is 47. If we go over here, the data is actually correctly updated. Now for the delete, it's the most simple one because it's literally user.delete, and then in the end we return a response with the actual HTTP code saying that there was an item deleted. And it is as simple as that. We can actually test that one out as well. I'm going to try to delete the first user. So we're going to put 1 over here. Perfect. And in the Django REST framework whole UI over here, we actually have a delete option over here, this button over here. And I can click on that, and it will ask if for sure we want to delete that user. I'm going to click delete. And now if I search for the list of users, you should see there's only John. Now, if you're still a bit confused with all of this, don't worry, I'm going to make more videos on this because it's a very simple framework to create APIs. In a very small amount of time, we made a simple CRUD that is able to do all this kind of operations, and we barely had to set up any database or anything. It's all done within the package. Now, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. I'll put this code up so you guys can just check it out. If you want to see more of this, just leave a comment down below, because I'll get the impression that you guys want to see more Python. If you think there's parts of my explanation that I can improve, please let me know. And if you have any questions, please comment down below. I'm gonna answer to them, because this is my first time making a Python video, so I definitely want to pass the impression that I can teach you guys, and I want to improve my actual teaching performance on this topic. So feel free to leave some comments, and I'll try to answer as many as I can. So with that in mind, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.